What's up, everybody? Welcome to Conversations with me, your host, Jason Glaze. Hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, do all the things. Subscribe, like, drop a comment. That helps our algorithms. If you are listening on Spotify or iTunes, hey, leave us a review. You're going to love this conversation. My dear friend, Holly Goddard, is here. We have a wonderful conversation. We basically talk about her journey through her childhood, her experiences in ministry, how she dealt with loved ones and addiction, what it's like to be a woman in leadership today. It was a great conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I know you will too. Hey, Holly.
Hey.
Thank you so much.
Oh, so glad to be
I
here.
know your schedule, and I know you got 3 kids. So
I do have 3 kids.
You're busy.
Yes. But we're in the last days of summer, so any chance to kind of get out of the house, I'm
Need
good.
that break.
Yeah.
My mom and aunts used to joke, and they may not have joked, they may actually did it, that when it was time for the school buses to come back, they were going to have champagne in the driveway.
A lot of moms do that. A lot of moms have that, and there is no judgment. You know, it is hard making it through summer.
It is, especially as busy as kids are now.
It's a lot to juggle, but it's so fun too.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
But it's time.
It's time.
It's time.
Yeah. So when I started making a short list of people I want to have conversations with, you were on it immediately.
Oh, thank you.
So I know who you are, but people watching this or listening to it don't. So let's just start by you giving us the vitals. Who's Holly?
Holly Goddard. I've been married 18 years to David. We met in college. We have 3 kids. They're 14, 13, and 8.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a ministry leader, executive pastor at North Point Community Church. Actually a product of that church. First church I ever went to consistently. I've been to a couple, but that's been a huge part of my story. Played tennis in college. So big tennis family. So we didn't go to church growing up because we played tennis every weekend. So highly competitive family, but and fun, you know, lots of sports, lots of activities. Still love all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I want to start this conversation by kind of working our way up. I was tempted to go to right to when we met at church.
Yeah.
But I think I want to get more of your backstory because here in the South, especially in Dawson County, everybody grew up in church, right?
Yeah.
So when we run across somebody who didn't, we're like, ooh, let's get that story. And then, but to see how quickly you progressed in ministry, not being raised in the church is really cool. So like, what was home life like growing up spiritually?
It's so weird because I would not say I grew up in a Christian home. Now, my parents, they just kind of said, hey, we're Christians, like everyone's a Christian. So I was like, okay, great. I'll accept that. Now, I did have a grandmother that lived with me, and she was a Jesus follower. So I would pass by her rooms in the morning and see her with her little white Bible open. She would watch Charles Stanley. She would go to church every week. She would invite me. There's no way I'm getting up early doing that. So no. And plus we traveled a lot of weekends for tournaments. So the temperature in our home where athletics were important, academics were important. And it was a little bit, now I kind of know, it was a little bit of a dysfunctional household. Secrets, addiction. You know, my parents didn't have a marriage where one of them was not faithful. So kind of a secret life thing going on.
Sure.
So kind of didn't know those things until about adulthood started to set in. But I did know, I felt like I was on eggshells all the time. So firstborn, so responsible, you know, mediator, take care of things.
How many siblings?
Oldest of 4.
Okay.
Yeah. And, but didn't know anything different. You know, we were healthy. We were happy. We went to school. We had clothes. Like, okay. But kind of didn't realize that things weren't that functional in our household, but faith really wasn't a part of it.
Yeah.
At all.
So sports being a big deal, grades being a big deal, that just sets you up for the performance mentality, correct?
Oh my gosh.
So like worth, value, identity, all based on what I do?
I mean, Enneagram 3, several of us are, of the 4 children. Really? So imagine, we're so competitive with each other.
What is your wing?
Oh gosh. I don't know.
2 or
I'm not sure. I'm not like super like well-versed in it. But I do know, you know, I take the Strengths Finder, Achievers, number 1.
Sure.
And so much of my mentality has always been an earning mentality. That's just how I thought life was because I just wanted my dad to be proud of me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I wanted the most. And he wasn't that impressed. So there was a lot to work on. In fact, I remember being 12 years old and him saying, hey, you're going to have to be an overachiever in life because that's what people without a lot of talent have to do.
Oh, wow.
And I just said, okay, like I just took that like that is fact. That is something I'm going to have to do. And I just kind of said, what's important to him? Okay, athletics, academics, looking good. He needs some stuff to brag on. What could I do to make that happen?
Right.
And that just set me on a course, of relationally and just even in actions.
Yeah.
Just wired tightly,
Yeah.
uptight.
So Christianity, church wasn't a big theme in your home, but it was kind of hinted at.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. With a dad who performance-based, achieving, did that influence how you saw God's character? Like, did you assume he was the same way growing up when you did think about him?
Yeah. I mean, I was a little scared of God. Like I was a little scared of my dad.
Okay. Yep.
Also, how I experienced my dad was just distant and critical, sort of judgmental, hard to please. And over time, I realized that's how I saw God too. And,
Right.
And so really early in faith, I just wanted to be a good girl.
Sure.
I just thought if you're good, if I could follow, some good principles and be a good person, then my life will go good.
Right.
And we did have some addiction in our household, and all I wanted was a path out of that. I wanted a different life than I grew up in. And so that's what intrigued me about faith. I knew a few families who they definitely were, parents that were raising their kids in the faith. And so I thought, okay, that's kind of the ticket to a different lifestyle. That was what was intriguing to me.
Gotcha. And if I remember correctly from your story, you came to Christ at like 25, 24?
Yeah. Well, I was like a 12-year-old laying in bed one night, and I remember being like, okay, I know about the prayer. I've heard it. I've popped in a few youth things,
Sure.
right? You hear the prayer, and you hear like what your choices are. It's like, okay, wow, sure. I'd choose that. I remember laying in bed being like, all right, Lord, don't know if this ever taken before, but just in case not, here I go one more time. And so the next morning I went to my mom like, hey, I did this thing. And she was like, oh, you're supposed to get baptized next. But we don't go to church often, and that's super embarrassing. So she took me at night and to go like walk down and tell the preacher like, hey, she made a decision. So I actually went and got baptized then. In a church I really didn't even attend very much. But just again, like, here's the process. Here's the rules. Here's
what you do.
But no idea who Jesus was, how to follow him, what a relationship, how he looked at me. And so then about 24, 25, when I had done all the things that I said I would never do.
In college?
Oh, yeah. And was like, oh my gosh, I say I'm a Christian. I don't even know what that is, or that's it. I'm done. I'm kind of all or nothing. So I was like, I'm done. Let's go to church.
Okay.
And so a friend tells me, hey, you should check out this church in Buckhead. And so I went.
So that you started going to Buckhead first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Grocery store. So it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
It was still in the grocery store?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so you're out of college at this point or in college?
I'm out of college, but I had moved here for grad school to Atlanta, sports marketing.
Oh, where did you grow up?
Augusta, Georgia.
Oh, that's right. I
Yeah.
knew that. Okay. So when did you meet David?
We met in college.
Okay.
So funny story. We stay up drinking all night. I guess that's okay to say.
Oh, absolutely. You haven't watched many of these yet, have you?
Yeah. And because that's what you do in college. It was so funny, but because we had this long conversation about like when we grew up, like when we became like real adults, like we weren't going to do this anymore. Like we were going to have a Christian marriage and life. And he grew up in a very, very Christian home.
Okay.
Several times a week at church. He knows every verse, sword drills. He can't dress up for Halloween. He's got to be, David from the Bible or carry the sword of the Spirit. Like, so very different upbringing than me. Meanwhile, we're watching Hellraiser at our house, so it's so different. But I had that in me of like, oh, cool. I want a different path. Meet David. And then several years go by and we run back into each other at a wedding. And, he's really at this point in his life, he's sober. He's really starting to follow Jesus and really take it seriously. And I was super attracted to that. And we get married.
Unfortunately, I don't know David as well as I know you.
Yeah.
I would love to. But the interactions I have had with David, tell me if I'm accurate.
Okay.
He's the fun guy, right?
He's fun.
He's fun.
He's fun. He's got woo. When I love taking him to events because he can like work the crowd. He has everyone's phone number by the time we leave. I'm like, you just go, hey, can I have your phone number? Like, I don't understand. But yeah, he that's him.
So I knew his story. He struggled with addiction.
Yes.
But I thought that was when you were before you were married?
I mean, it had been a long part of his story.
Okay.
So when I married him,
he was sober.
Yeah, and I knew he had struggled, and I did not understand addiction at
Sure.
that time. I thought I was in college, everyone did some wild things, and he's kind of gotten off that path. I didn't realize that he had crossed the line of addiction and that it would ever come up for us again.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to walk us toward that part of the story?
Yeah, so that was the shock of the century. About a year into marriage, his addiction flared up. And again, at that time, I did not understand addiction. I have a brother that's in recovery. I've had my mom struggled with addiction. And so it wasn't unfamiliar, but I was also a little bit in denial and just naive.
Sure.
To how baffling and cunning and powerful that disease is.
Yeah.
And because I can kind of will my stuff out, I can kind of achieve or work a plan to get out of something, didn't really understand why it didn't work that way. So, it surfaced again a year into marriage. And, a couple of things we did right is we confronted it right away. Like I knew it was a big deal. I picked him up from the golf cart course and went and dropped him right off at rehab. Like, this is above my pay grade, but you're taking care of this, and, but also a little naive of that it was going to be like a lifelong process of recovery, and somewhat resistant to that idea. But I did go through a program called Celebrate Recovery for myself.
Okay.
Where I did a 9-month study written by Rick Warren, where you go through the steps yourself as the codependent. Yep. Yeah. Sort of realizing, that's my role and how I got there. And that was pretty life-changing for me because I thought I went to deal with David and I went to deal with me.
With you.
Yeah.
So through Celebrate Recovery, walking through the steps as a codependent, did you begin to see, this is what codependent behavior looks like?
Yeah, and it was hard for me to come to grips that it was wrong because I've been such the fixer in the family, and especially being a newer Christian, I was doing all this out of love. Like I thought that's what love required of me. And I certainly didn't understand boundaries. I didn't understand emotional health at all.
Yeah.
So it was just I didn't even know I was embarking on a brand new journey.
Sure. And so if this might start sounding like a counseling session.
No, well, that's usually how it goes with me.
So if we was to back up into your childhood, oldest of 4.
Yeah.
Did you feel responsible for your siblings ever?
Always.
Okay. So, yeah.
I felt unsafe in my environment, and like my job was to protect everyone and keep them safe.
There we are.
Yeah.
There we are. Do you remember the age where you first felt that? Ballpark.
11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
adolescence.
you felt something a child is never designed to feel, which is responsible for another human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And once a child feels responsible for another human, their sense of responsibility gets warped, right? And the next thing we know, we're in a codependent relationship.
Yeah.
It's like a moth to a flame. Like you're drawn to an addict, an addict's drawn to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really hard thing to realize. Like, why was I drawn to? I was aware of that. Like, I wanted the exact opposite, and here I am. Like, how did that happen?
Yep.
So I was very curious to why that happened.
Yeah. Same thing. I'm in recovery. And so it's the same thing. I'm drawn to the codependent. Codependent's drawn to me. And it's just like, I don't know. It's like this weird thing.
Yeah.
But God ends up working it out.
He does. If both people work on themselves, there's a chance.
Oh, for sure.
But it has to be, it's an all-in sport.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to play.
Yeah. So a year into the marriage, he gets sober then?
He does.
Or starts the journey?
He does start the journey.
Okay.
He starts the journey, and then we had a really big relapse when we had girls that were 3 and 4. And that was really life-altering. That's really when my views of God really got tested, because I had been following the Christian formula and it was not working out, and I was mad now. I wasn't like open, like Pollyanna, like let's forge through this. I was like, oh, heck no. Why the heck is this happening? All my boxes were being blown up. And
so you were doing all the right things, living the right life, and he was not coming in and fulfilling his part of the promise in your mind.
Yes, and and with God, I was like,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
no, with David.
Yeah,
you're saying, hey, God, I'm doing all the right things.
Yeah, like what's up?
You're not doing your end, God.
Yeah, for real. That's how I felt. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's when God and I went on, our journey got deeper, I would say. Yeah.
Did you feel safe enough to express your anger?
Always.
Good.
And that could be, I've always felt like God knows what I'm thinking.
Right.
Like, why not just come out of the gate with it? I've always felt so comfortable with him, even though with some of my false views, for some reason, I always felt like he knows anyway. What am I going to pretend? You know?
Yeah.
So that's been helpful.
So David has a big relapse when the kids are like 3 and 4.
Yeah.
And then finish that story.
Yeah, we lose everything. I mean, we have to move. We have to sell our house. I can't support us on a ministry salary. We're living in someone's basement. People are buying me groceries. I mean, it was humiliating and humbling at the same time. And sort of my Achilles heel is that I really like to be independent. I really like to be able to take care of myself. And, you know, I was just an emotional mess. I can't take care of me and my children. You know, it was a really, I don't know, just a crushing period for me. And we were apart for about 6 months while he went and did an intensive. And then I wasn't quite ready. You know, I had a lot to work through.
Sure.
So it was a building back process for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in that process, you learned how to receive help from others, which was difficult.
Yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah.
And I've never been so grateful for the body of Christ. It's like I understood what it meant. And I don't know that I would have really gotten that any other way.
Yeah.
And I'm dependent, which is a really hard confession for me. It sounds silly, but it's in the way I'm wired. I want to take care of myself. Something makes me feel safe if I don't need people or if I don't, need something from someone.
Yeah. Well, if you look at your upbringing of performance and then you add your Enneagram 3.
Yeah.
Needing someone else is not easy.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you translate that over to God, and we can't be needy on him either. Yeah. Yeah. So David goes off for 6 months, comes back, and everything's trending up in the right since then. Yeah,
like we're both like so willing to do the work.
Sure.
And probably what turned the corner for me is that he moves back in for a little while, and then we're expecting our 3rd child. And I was like, okay, we're really doing this. Okay. We're, like, let's get our butts in gear.
We're in it.
Yeah, we're in it.
Yeah.
And I was so terrified to have a son, and it has been God knows what we need. The best gift. He's the best kid. And in some ways, like, put us back to, we were like, wow, we have to get on the same page. And so we did, and worked super hard. And on ourselves individually, and we've been on that journey ever since. But it's been more freedom. I thought it was going to be so laborious, and at first it was because we were both resistant.
Right.
But it's just everyone knew our story. Our story was so public, which helped us in a really surprising way. That it seems like it would be super shameful. Like everyone knows my crap, but everyone knew my crap. Everyone knew his crap.
There's nothing else to hide.
And they accepted us anyway. And it was so healing and freeing. And especially for him when he tells his story, the way that people accepted him when he came back was super healing. I gotta have him
on the podcast.
He's a great person to talk to, and he has such a cool story.
Yeah. So while you're going through this whole bit with addiction, you're already on staff at the church?
Yeah, I'm a director. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's back up and kind of walk from so you started going to Buckhead.
Yeah.
Walk this part of the story up of how you went from attending Buckhead to actually coming on staff.
Yeah, so 10 Buckhead, we move up to near North Point because we have no other anchoring point in the city, but we're like, we're going to go to this church. Go there. We get into a small group with Joel Thomas, which seemed like such luck at the time. He was the lead pastor at North Point, which was so providential because he was a good friend. He was a good boss. He helped me kind of intervene when we had to do an intervention with David. He's who I called, and we went in, and so he was actually, that small group was the first place we ever told our story. And we were both terrified to tell our story to the lead pastor. It felt humiliating, but he was so helpful when we needed him. And he's the one who invited me on staff. I was in group with him a few weeks, and he asked for a resume, and the next thing I know, I'm the director of the preschool department.
Nice.
No ministry experience, no experience with kids other than I have a couple. So I don't know why they hired me, but they did. And that's when it happened. And honestly, so weird. It's so counterintuitive. But all the things I went through, I don't even think I could lead at any level if I had not gone through those things and navigated and grown through them, because leadership is also emotionally taxing.
For sure.
You need so much emotional fortitude, so much boundaries, differentiation, all those things that I learned through the fire of my personal life. So that was my journey. I was the Womberland director, and then I decided I want to go to seminary. That sounds so fun. I want to learn more. And so I did. And then that's when I moved up to Brownsbridge and I met you.
Right.
Started working at Starting Point in married groups, and my first journey into like adult ministry.
Yeah.
And those kind of difficult, hard conversations of adult faith. And I wanted to be in that place because of what I'd navigated in my personal life.
Yeah. And that's when I first met you, is I was heavily involved in Starting Point.
Yeah.
And then we needed a director. And then they brought you in.
I know. I raised my hand. I asked for it. Yeah. They were like, "Are you sure?"
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we led maybe 2 groups together.
Yeah.
And we actually did something super cool. We took Starting Point Mobile. You and I went to a women's rehab.
Yes.
And took Starting Point there. For people who don't know what Starting Point is, it's a super cool environment for seekers, starters, and returners.
Yep.
It's a short, I think it's 12 weeks now. And you basically just walk through what I would call the essentials of faith.
Yeah.
And I've watched God do so many things super fast in that environment.
I love that environment. And why I was attracted to it, I think, is that I feel like I knew adults, when they're wrestling with faith, it's not necessarily the heady theological. It's there's some wounding in their life. And they're like, maybe God can explain this, but it's not adding up when I'm trying to do the math. Well, that's how I felt. So at least I felt like I can relate to these people.
Right.
I know what it's like to have like not a squeaky clean story, and then to kind of have to overcome the shame of like, oh, I'm going to go into this church, this squeaky, clean place. What's what you think.
Sure.
You think everyone's got it together.
Sure.
And bring your story and your questions, and that's what I love about that environment.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think one of the taglines is, some questions deserve an answer, some deserve a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it's set up to be. And that's where I met you. We started leading some groups together, and we just had a lot of fun. Like, we really did. I think you were my favorite person I ever led with.
Oh, thank you.
We had so much fun. And I started noticing, because I don't know how much of your story I knew then, but I started watching you lead. And I was like, what is it about Holly? There was something about you I couldn't put my finger on. I could have some descriptive words that I saw, and it was humility, teachability, but also a confidence, a good, healthy confidence. Like, you were not afraid of anything. Like, I remember you and I got in one situation. Remember that situation?
Yes, I do.
Won't use any names.
Oh, yeah.
We got in one situation where we had a group member, and the next thing I know, we actually got like undercover cops involved and all that. And you were like, yeah, let's handle this.
Yeah.
You and I had like a 3-minute phone call. We're like, yeah, this is how we're going to handle this. And we went and handled it, right?
Oh, my gosh.
And you were like brand new to the role.
Yes.
And so it was super cool to see a level of humility, teachability, but also this confidence.
Oh, thank you.
And I started telling people, like in my men's group and stuff, like, she's not going to be here long. Like, I knew that you were going to be gone, right? And sure enough, next thing I know, Holly's gone. Right?
Yeah.
And so you were with Starting Point for a while, and then what were the steps after that?
Yeah, so I got invited to come back to North Point and do a similar role working in groups there. And I didn't know at the time, but it was a very transitional moment where Andy was coming back to lead out of North Point. And so the minute I get back, and I don't know, I obviously know Andy's the pastor. I know of him. I'd never been in a meeting with him or a conversation with him. And I'm back at North Point, and he comes and sits down beside me. We're hosting a conference, and he says, I'm coming back to North Point, and I hear you're the person to lead all the teams here. Do you want to have a conversation about that? Which, I was like, oh my gosh, but of course, what do you say? Yes. Sure, I'd love to. I'm like, what in the world? Shaking in my boots. And he doesn't know me. He's just kind of going off of some feedback, but he said he had heard something I'd done with the Womberland team, which, a project we had worked on that had gotten some results. And he just said, hey, I hear you can get results and that people enjoy the journey. So come do that with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Let every team report to you. And so even he wasn't totally sure when he gave me the job. I remember he gave me like a 4-bullet job description. He slips it across the table and he says, all right, we'll see. I was like, so you're offering me the job? Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. But it's been a really hard and good and rewarding journey, as leadership is.
Yeah. What's been the toughest part about your new role?
You know, the first few years were the toughest part because there was so much change at once.
COVID?
Oh, well, it was 2019 when I stepped in.
That's right.
So personally, I'm really struggling. My mom has just passed away about a week before I get this job from addiction. A new leader's coming. Anytime a new leader brings a lot of uncertainty, people's insecurities flare. And then, you know, of course, a year later, not even a year later, COVID hits.
Right.
So it could not have been more of an emotional environment. And so I struggle because all the things that had kind of gotten me to the place I was, you know, like I met with a counselor all the time. I had a leadership executive coach. I had good pockets of people. In the stress, I sort of let go of some of the systems and rhythms that had kept me really healthy. And I became really anxious. And it took a couple of events for me to realize, well, my body was actually telling me.
Okay.
You know how your body tells you
100%.
way before that, like, you're not okay. And so I had a couple of wake up calls. So that was the hard part of, I kind of took the bait of, it was a high stress environment. And, I didn't have some of my self-care things in place.
Was your body telling you just through basic anxiety?
Anxiety, and I would, you know, I broke out shingles, rashes, like there wasn't really any hiding it. I was stressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just hard. I had just leveled up in a way that I hadn't before. And I was in a bunch of situations. I'd never been in a worldwide pandemic. I'd never been in a leader that everyone loved left, a leader that people revered but were unsure of was coming in. And I was having trouble with my anxiety, so it was hard for me to bring that calm into spaces. And I was very task-oriented and very like, let's get this done. You know, I just went into my mode.
Let's get this done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you say a leader that was loved left, unsure, a leader they're unsure of comes in. I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus, but like, what was that like? Did you feel some resistance from some staff or some people you were leading? At like, hey, who is this? And what is...
Oh, yeah. Well, it's so interesting because when they announced it, you know, what was so kind of Clay was the leader that was leaving. And if you know Clay Scroggins, you love him.
Sure.
I loved working for him. Fun. I mean, you laugh at every staff meeting. It is like a comedy show, but he's full of integrity and he's such a great teacher and he's just a good time. And he did announce that I was taking the role and people applauded. People stood up. I was like, wow. What's happening? I told Andy that and he said, oh, just wait. They'll stop clapping. And that was a really intimidating statement. I know what he means now. But at the time I was like, no, I'm not used to people not liking me. Like, and it's really different. I have a different style than Clay, and Andy has a very different style. And, you know, part of being a follower and being a leader of departments is you have to learn to adjust. The mission was the same. The vision was the same. A few tactics were different, but people were very resistant. And people grieve when there's change and they get nervous and insecure.
Sure.
And I think I could have been a little more in tune with some of that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, that's even good that you can look back and see that.
Yeah.
To be just more in tune with some people just don't like change.
Yeah.
To where your personality was, you know, hey, you want a job? And you're like, I'm scared to death, but yes, I want the job.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm going to go for it and I'll figure it out.
And not everybody's wired like that.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's really good insight that you can look back and see that as well. So how were you able to start to navigate that kind of tension?
Yeah. It's hard. You know, I had to leadership is so emotional, you know, and the leader sets the tone and the leader has to keep doing the work on their own inner life. Yeah. And so when I began to stop sort of fixating on what needed to change and sort of like getting my agency back of like, I can walk into the room and I can set the temperature and I can role model. You know, I think I realized most people don't come out of you probably know this way better being a counselor. I don't know that most people have a great role model if they come from a family that is has dysfunction or maybe isn't emotionally safe. And so they don't have a good role model. So when points of tension come, they're going to have their stress reactions.
Yeah.
And so I can role model staying calm, listening, being empathetic, but moving on.
Yeah.
And when I kind of took my agency back to, that's what I can do. And like, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then the tide started to change.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said that you got away from your self-care.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you got back involved with your
have,
self-care. Talk about that. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think I have really embraced some rhythms for my spiritual life, and then like some systems for my emotional and physical life.
All right. Talk through those.
Yeah. So rhythms, there's the daily rhythm of getting up in the morning and starting the day in the Word, which it's crazy that can slip so fast, but it was for me. And then quarterly, I'm going tomorrow actually.
Are you?
Off-site. I go from like 9 to 2 and I'm just quiet with God. And I just journal. I listen to music. I pray. I just do whatever. I always leave so refreshed, and like He resets my perspective, and I need that just filling up from Him. So those spiritual rhythms of the Word and silence and solitude are super important for me. And play is one I've had to incorporate, because when you're wound tight, you need to learn to enjoy. Life is so good.
Yeah.
You just need to enjoy it. That's part of the gift. And so actually you have to make that part of my rhythm too.
Yeah.
And then kind of the systems for the emotional and physical it's the leadership coach. I like to process with people down the road from me with gray hair that have perspective I don't have, that can help me, get that objective perspective I need.
Yep.
I just need a voice in my life that is not attached to anything else I do.
Yeah.
And so I have that back in place. And then I go to my counselor about once a month. And if there's anything I still need to unpack from my past, there's a space created to do that, so I don't have to wait for an emergency, because that's what happened. I had to wait an emergency, and then I'm calling up like, you fit me back in?
I got shingles.
Yeah. So terrible. So and the physical health. So a recent part of my story is I had a really big health thing happen about a year ago, and that has I've always loved to exercise and try to eat decent kind of thing, but that reset my perspective of how important it is to take care of your body.
Talk to us about that. What happened?
I went on a mission trip.
Okay.
First one ever.
Well, the stories usually start like that. I went on a mission trip.
Yeah.
On the plane ride back, I started feeling.
Yes. Me and the girls went to Costa Rica, it was such a lovely trip. It was like, people said, this is a good entry level one for you, Holly. Like, it's bougie enough. Okay. Great. Sign me up. But we did get some bad something, some kind of food, 3 of us, and contracted hepatitis A from food. So it incubates. So a couple weeks later, I'm like, I can't get out of bed. I'm fatigued. I'm like, what is happening? And I'm thinking I need fluid. David takes me to the ER to get fluid, and they're like, you've been out of the country? Yeah. We answer all the questions. They run the labs, and they're like, yeah, you're getting admitted. Your liver numbers we're calling it an infectious disease, doctor. And so that was like, wait, what? And so they're like, we need to admit you because we need to watch for liver failure.
Oh my goodness.
And so your liver's super important. I learned a lot about it. And it begins to fail when your numbers hit 7,500. Mine were at 6,600. Yours right now are probably at 30. So if that tells you, I have felt what it feels like when your organs try not to work, and it's horrible. And
what were you feeling physically? You said fatigue.
I was just so sick. I was on pain medicine, so I wouldn't have to feel it.
I'm with you.
It was, and I was so jaundiced that I was like Michael Jackson eyes of Thriller. I was very yellow, very jaundiced.
Wow. I've never heard of Hep A.
It's not common in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually not even common in Costa Rica. It was a really freak thing. But 3 of us got it and were hospitalized, all of us, yeah.
So like 2 other people that went with you, or your daughters?
No. So kids, they started vaccinating for them a couple of years ago, which I'm so grateful. That was my first thought, of course, when I was in the hospital, like, but no, all the kids on the trip were great. It's just a few of us who hadn't.
How long were you in the hospital?
5 days.
Wow.
until you just kind of, they give you medicines to detox your liver and you just try to see if it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a waiting game, but I did not go to work for 40 more days.
40 days off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my sabbatical. Yeah.
That's not the sabbatical you're
looking for. No.
Yeah.
But it was a big game changer in my perspective on life, really.
Is that the first time in your life that you were really forced to slow down?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
And because usually I'm in charge of all the things. You know, I'm in charge at work. Any problem. I always say I broker the hardest problems. Like, that's my job. If it bubbles up, and in the family, a lot of times I've been in that position. And again, helpless, dependent on everybody else.
Yeah. I want to rewind just a little bit.
Yeah.
When you start talking about your spiritual rhythms, you start talking about silence and solitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're speaking my language now.
Yeah.
And so are you noticing, like, the older you get, the more of that you need?
And crave.
That's a great word.
Yeah, I do. My biggest lesson from Hep A was there is so much love surrounding me all the time, but I don't have the margin to reciprocate it.
Wow.
And that was a hard thing for me to realize, of like, you know, because people are so kind when these moments happen in life, and you're like, realize how good you have it and how many people love you. And I was like, I move so fast that I miss these moments. I don't even see the brilliance in people because I'm blowing and going. And without me getting still, I can't see clearly. I really can't.
Yeah, me too. I go through seasons where I do really well. And then it's like, once my brain starts getting addicted to the busyness, or just not really busyness, it's just a stimulation.
Yeah.
Once my brain gets addicted to it again, now we got to detox again, re-enter. And I'm kind of in one of those phases right now where I'm re-entering into the stillness. And then every time I'm like, why did I leave?
Yeah.
You know, why did I leave?
Why did I get so wound up again?
Yeah.
And it's the stimulation. And we're just not meant to carry that much.
For sure, especially with phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so have you also noticed that the more the stillness and silence you get, the more you are now prepared for chaos?
Yes.
Because I think you told me a story about just this last weekend. Yeah, just kind of walk us through that story.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. That's, what a great example. I was actually just at the beach for a couple days. And I had prepared for Sunday, you know, because Sunday's always coming in our world. And I do the hosting at church. So I get up for the first 3 or 4 minutes and welcome and say whatever needs to be said. It's usually light, fun, you know. So I was prepared, went to the beach for a couple days. I'm driving back, and my children actually tell me, someone texts them, hey, former President Trump, someone just shot him.
Just got shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we're like, what? What is this? You know, and then you're in the frenzy of trying to find the news and figure out what's real and process something so bizarre and startling. And then I realize, oh, I'm up on Sunday. Am I the one that's supposed to talk about this? You know? And I try to be like, no, I don't have to talk about it. Oh, wait, yes, I do. Everyone's going to be walking in the door. And my daughter, she's watching me process this. She said, Mom, this is so hard that, like, you have to help people process this, and you're trying to process it yourself. And I was like, this is hard. And so I went to the front porch. It's like it was my little spot during Hep A too, where I would spend time. Which I'm just like, okay, God, what do you want to say to your people? What do you want to say?
Surrendered.
Yeah. And then, you know, wrote a little, and my whole thought was like, I'm just going to point people to Jesus. He's the example that we follow, and he's what unites us. And, you know, that's the thing people need to hear tomorrow. And so went in and did that. Yeah. But you're right, without the rhythms and the stillness, it's hard to get to that place where you can hear from him.
It really is. What would you say, because I've heard you make this statement before, like you were your track was so fast in the leadership. You did not even know that women in leadership was even an issue in some circles, right?
No clue. No.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it was a thing about women not being able to lead. You know, people have different theologies or thoughts on that. So I didn't know it was a thing or a big deal. And then I started recognizing that some people did. So I was like, oh, I wonder what I think about this. And I kind of went on a journey to figure it out or just to have an opinion about it. But the interesting thing that I knew that was true for me is like, I had never gone and knocked on any door or tried to kick it down or say, put me on stage or give me, it had just all kind of come to me. And so I just thought, well, I'm just keep walking through the doors that God opens and trust that he's in this.
Sure.
And it's been a really cool journey. And I obviously think women have a lot to offer
1,000%
in ministry, and that we get to see the beautiful parts of the feminine and the masculine characteristics of God.
Oh, come on.
And it's so beautiful. And you know something, when I'm going up on stage, Larry Crabb was one of my professors.
Oh,
you probably know him from the counseling world.
Absolutely.
I remember him telling me, like, one of the feminine characteristics of God is to welcome people into the kingdom, which usually women get, like, you know, bake the bread, make the cookies, and that ain't a thing. Because, you know, I've never been a stay-at-home mom or whatever, and that's a great thing. But every time I walk up those stairs to go on the stage, I say, Lord, help me welcome them into your kingdom. I mean, I think it just looks a lot of different ways, but that's just what it looks like to portray the feminine characteristics of God.
Oh, so good. I just had this conversation yesterday morning about how, you know, the feminine side of God is not talked about enough. Old Testament, we get some glimpses of the feminine side of God. Like he says, you know, I birthed Israel from my womb.
Yeah.
Jesus comes on the scene and he just uses the word father, I think because he knew we all got daddy wounds.
Right. True that. Yes.
But still, God created both male and female in his image, which means he's fully both and transcends both. I think that's such a good point to make for any church leaders listening. Like, if you're hesitant to put women in leadership, you're robbing your people of half of God's character.
I know. And in rooms, like, you just need the perspective of both. It just makes us more whole. And that's what we're trying to lead people to, the wholeness that God offers. And
100%.
I think it's beautiful. And I'm so grateful that I've worked for some really secure men who get it, because that's been a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. I listened to your podcast with Andy on intuition. And I was sitting there going, yes, 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 because I got two ladies on staff here, and I don't hire they do more. If I'm going to hire somebody, they do more interviews than I do with them, because I trust their intuition even over mine.
Oh, wow.
You know, there's something about the female intuition that in a lot of situations is way stronger than men.
Yeah.
So to be able to utilize both in any organization is just a no-brainer to me.
It only makes us stronger.
It does. Yeah. Speaking of Larry Crabb, I don't want to go down this road too far, because I don't want to get into something too controversial. But I remember, you know, when Andy wrote, was it Big and Wide? What was it?
Deep and Wide.
Deep and Wide. Okay. And then he went in and he started doing that series on unhinging from the old covenant.
Oh, yeah.
Unhitched from the old covenant. Everybody lost their mind, right?
Right.
I'm sitting there going, have y'all read Larry Crabb's Pressure Off?
Love that book.
Holy cow.
I love that book.
But nobody gave him any flack.
Yeah.
You talk about unhitching from an old covenant. That whole book is about that covenant will kill you.
Yeah.
And we've got this new covenant that's so refreshing. Why would you ever want to go back to the old? I'm like, y'all didn't give Larry any flack. Why y'all on Andy?
I know. You know what is so interesting coming to faith as an adult was my view of God. God mean, Jesus nice. Like, he's big and powerful, and he created these people, so he had to he had to throw us a bone with Jesus. And that was sort of the old covenant, new covenant thinking that I picked up by osmosis. I don't know how, but you know, read some of the stories in the Old Testament, and you might think, gosh, that was harsh.
Sure.
And so for me, kind of hearing those things just brought more understanding to the text rather than, than some other reactions. But the thing probably with Larry and probably with Andy is they're thinking about the adult who they don't have the framework and can't process all of this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that we ignore the Old Testament, but we're not under an old covenant. And I think every Christian would agree with that. Yeah. You know,
they definitely probably eat bacon. Like you know what I mean? Like, we don't follow all the things. Yeah. And so,
I just didn't understand why people lost their mind over that one. But I think some people just need to lose their mind over things.
Sometimes it's just so nice not to actually understand what triggers all of those things, you know, from not growing up in it.
Sure.
And I think I've realized in ministry, we see the world as we are, not necessarily as the world. We just have so many different filters, and they're filters of our wounds and our family of origin and how we were introduced to faith. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like we're all trying to figure it. Like we're all just trying to be on the journey.
We bring our whole self to the question.
Yeah.
We bring our whole self to the tension. And so we have to acknowledge that when we're talking to people, like, this person I'm talking to, they're not seeing this the way I am because they're bringing their whole self to it. I'm bringing my whole self to it. Now let's have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
And once we have a conversation, whether we see eye to eye or not, we're going to walk away not hating each other, not backbiting each other, and hopefully understanding each other. That's where I'm at right now. Is I just want to understand. I don't want to agree with everyone. I don't think that's healthy.
Yeah.
I don't think it's healthy. There's tons of stuff. I'm sure that I've never met Andy, but if he and I sat down and just started hashing it out, there's a ton of stuff that he probably subscribes to that I disagree with, and vice versa. But that's okay. I just want to understand. Politically right now, right? We're in a season where the politics are just nuts. I just want to understand where the other side is coming from. Because I think if I can understand, I don't have to agree, but at least I'm not going to feel that thing that rises up in us that ends up causing the problem.
Yeah.
The disagreements that's not what's causing the problem. It's the attitude behind the disagreement that's causing our problems right now in churches, nations, and everywhere.
It almost is, I wonder sometimes, is it our inability to deal with our own discomfort, our own anxiety, our own, what if I'm wrong, or what if I'm scared of them? It's our inability to deal with ourselves in those moments.
I think so.
That make us want to go run to our different corners or go after somebody.
Yeah.
And it's just like, again, deal with you.
Yeah.
If everyone just deal with them.
Yeah, just deal with yourself and have conversations.
Yeah.
Which is why I love doing this podcast.
Yeah, I love it.
Holly, this has been amazing.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
I have
It's
too.
always fun. I learned so much from you those years in Starting Point. You taught me how to have hard conversation. I got to watch you be open and non-judgmental and just move conversations around and make people feel seen. So thank you.
You're welcome. It was an honor journeying with you through that season.
I loved it too. It was good.
Will you come back?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.